All right, looking ahead at the agenda, today the mayor and council will discuss a new dog park in District 2 and host the final budget hearing for the 2019-2020 City Budget and Capital Improvement Project for 2018 to 2027. For the latest City of Wichita news, we encourage you to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Cox Channel 7. Good morning, Mayor Longwell and City Council.
Thank you, Megan. As the Vice Mayor likes to share, that's a lovely way to start our day. So we will jump right into our council meeting. We'll call it to order, and we have an invocation by Reverend Ben Staley of the Chapel Hill United Methodist Church. Following that invocation, a Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite all of you to join us for both of those. Reverend Staley, nice to have you.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, this is an important day of decisions. Decisions will be made that will impact the lives of the people of this community. We pray that you give our mayor and council members and all of us vision in order that we might look forward with courage and excitement, but also compassion, that we might care for one another, a sensitivity to concerns that are greater than any one of us. I pray, Lord, that you'll also give us integrity and moral courage to do that which is right at all times as best as we understand it. I pray that we might follow the ways of Christ, who cared more for others than ourselves. And we pray, Lord, for greater faith, that we might look to the future believing that you care for each one of us. We are your instruments of love and peace, and we want to follow in such ways according to your perfect plan for each of our lives and this city. We ask for your guidance in every decision made today. Give you thanks for those who are leading us. We pray that you'd give them wisdom and discernment, and that each of us might follow hard after the ways of Christ, who considered others more important than ourselves. In his name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the minutes of August 7th, 2018 for approval. Any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I move that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting on August 7th, 2018.
Second.
Motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, you want to call the next item?
Jacob Cairo, medical marijuana.
Is Jacob Caro? No Jacob. We'll move on. Madam Clerk, next item.
Consent agenda items 1 through 22.
Any items need to be pulled for clarification or discussion? Seeing none, I move that we approve consent agenda items 1 through 22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Kansas Global Trade Services 2018 Economic Development Services Agreement.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for a 2018 contract with Kansas Global Trade Services. Kansas Global Trade Services, which was formerly the Kansas World Trade Center, has been supported by the City of Wichita since 1998. The organization provides a variety of services to local companies, including educational seminars, market research, language classes, coordination of trade missions, and awareness of international trade opportunities. In 2014, the South Central region of Kansas went through an export plan development that was assisted by the Brookings Institute and J.P. Morgan Chase. The idea is that exports bring new dollars into the community. Typically, exporting companies pay higher wages, and for every $1 billion in exports, it supports 6,000 American jobs. The assessment in 2014 identified 5 key issues. One is that the region is export dependent, but is not globally oriented. The second is that the regional economy is vulnerable to the volatility of aviation exports. The third is that 90% of the regional exports are goods, and aviation is dominant among those goods. The fourth is that many exports are passive in their approach, in terms of companies being passive in their approach. And the fifth is that exporting companies do not use export assistance due to a lack of awareness of the services available. Coming out of that export plan, there were 5 identified goals for the plan. One is to catalyze export growth at 5 aviation suppliers per year. The second is to diversify exports by fostering growth in non-aerospace exports by 30% and services by 15% in 5 years. The third is to coordinate export assistance and promotional efforts to build a recognizable export ecosystem within 2 years. The fourth goal was to increase global fluency of the Wichita region by educating regional community leaders and companies in at least 2 meetings annually. And the fifth goal was to increase exports of small to medium-sized companies by adding 5 new-to-export non-aerospace companies annually, increasing the number of new markets entered per year and introducing exporting as a growth strategy to 100 companies within 5 years. It was projected that non-aerospace and service export growth would increase by at least $7.5 million through the first 3 years. At this point, it is approximately $6.3 million. It was also projected that 60 companies would attend educational seminars. To date, over 245 have attended educational seminars, and that there would be an outreach to one-on-one with companies of at least 150 companies. To date, that has been approximately 495 companies. In addition, J.P. Morgan Chase offered a $50,000 accelerator grant with a match from the 10-county region. Companies could apply for $5,000 in a grant to be used to grow exports. To date, over $78,000 has been awarded to companies, and companies that have received those grants have reported increased exports of almost $20 million to 20 different companies. In 2015, the city tasked Kansas Global Trade Services with the implementation of the Wichita South Central Kansas Export Plan. To date, from 2015 through last year, 2017, the city has awarded a contract to Kansas Global Trade Services of $200,000 a year to implement that plan, as well as to provide additional export services to companies in our region. The company is requesting the same $200,000 grant for $200,000 contract for 2018. This will be the last year of funding directly from the city. Beginning fiscal year 2019, the Greater Wichita Partnership has been delegated the responsibility to provide funding for economic development entities for our region. Therefore, it is the staff's recommendation that the City Council approve the proposed 2018 Economic Development Services Agreement for Kansas Global Trade Services with an effective date of January 1, 2018, and authorize the necessary signatures. Karen Page, who is the President and CEO of Kansas Global Trade Services, is here and is going to provide a little bit of information about where they're at with the program.
Thank you, Tim. Mayor and City Council, it's my pleasure to be here today. It's a little bittersweet since this is the last year that we'll directly work together. But I know that our long history will provide a bright future for us continuing to work together. The first slide I am sharing with you is to tell you the latest information on where Wichita ranks in the nation on export dependency. And just so that we're all clear, because I know the public is watching as well, let me explain just quickly what that figure means. What you do is you take the Wichita metro economic GDP and you divide into that the total amount of exports for the same geographic area, and you get a percentage. That percentage for the city of Wichita or the Wichita metro area is 20%. These are 2017 figures. That makes us the third most export-dependent city in the nation. So 20% of our metro economy is dependent on exports, which means if our companies that are exporting don't export anymore, 20% of our economy is in jeopardy. Sorry about that. Learn how to use the technology still. Wichita ranks number 1 according to a recent assessment by Brookings in terms of the risk of tariffs on Chinese imports. And the reason that we are sharing this with you is to make sure that you and the public understand that because of the exports and the trade relationships that we have, increased tariffs from China in particular, but in general, put us at greater risk of that 20% of our economy. A quick overview of the export plan performance objectives. Ending in the fourth quarter of 2017. We have produced the first and second quarter of 2018 as well, but for today's purposes, we're concentrating on the results from 2017. You should have received those first and second quarter of 2018 quarterly reports. If you have not, we're happy to share them with you. I wanted to call out just a couple of things. The first is that for the 5-year plan, we're watching whether we're performing or not in 5 objectives. And you can see the bar there is that we should be at, for this time in the plan, at 60% of completion for the 5-year plan. And for each of those objectives, we are exceeding where we should be. One particular one I call your attention to is Objective 2A, which is to diversify exports in non-aerospace goods. This was one of the key areas of the goal of the 5-year export plan, and you can see that we've concentrated a great deal of effort on that, which is why that green bar, the second one from the left, is much higher than the others. I wanted to add some information for you, a bit of an explanation. In Tim Goodpasture's presentation, he mentioned that the non-aerospace goal was about $7.5 million in the first 3 years, and we're only at 6.3%, or 6.3 million. Let me just explain a little bit more. The Export Accelerator Grant, which has produced about $19.5 million by the end of 2017, actually the majority of those companies that are using that grant are non-aerospace companies. When we're looking at tracking the performance objectives, we have to decide which bucket to put them in. And so if the company used the grant and they're reporting new exports from use of the grant, then it goes in that bucket, regardless of whether it went in the other ones as well. So we're really, despite that 7.5 versus 6.3, I think I can assure you that those non-aerospace objectives are much higher in that area. The total plan results from the to date, I should say, really counting 2016 and 2017 results. The first year we weren't able to report anything, it took us a little bit to get a new export sales, is $28.6 million. And I think that for your $600,000, 2015, 16, and 17, your contribution to the export plan, that $28.6 million is something we can be quite proud of. I want to close with mentioning just one other thing to you. And for those of you who know me will know that nothing if not genuine sometimes can be quite direct. But I just want you to know that from my very bottom of my heart as a professional, as a trade professional in Wichita, Kansas, in the center of the United States, what the city of Wichita has done with the export plan is nothing short of visionary and really speaks to your leadership. So I began this presentation by reminding you of how important this is to our economy by providing a comparison with other cities. And we're ending it with the results you have seen so far. What this speaks to is really your leadership. Not every city has an export plan. Not every city has a trade organization that is supported and allowed to provide services to the community. Only 30 cities in the nation have an export plan. And the city of Wichita is recognized by Brookings and JP Morgan Chase consistently as having one of the most robust in the nation. So thank you for supporting export innovation. It truly is innovative what the city has done, and you are to be congratulated and commended for that. And I'll take any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Questions, Councilmember Blueball?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions, but I did want to just commend you for, I've been to national events with you where Wichita has been recognized as a global city. I know how much you guys have done to train our local businesses on helping to expand their export opportunities, especially through the recession. There were so many businesses that weren't able to sell their normal products here locally, and you guys opened up their markets to where they could trade globally. So I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Councilman.
And Councilmember Clinton, and I thought we're supposed to address her as Dr. Page.
No, just Karen is fine.
All right.
No, not doctor yet.
Karen, thank you. We're going to heap, I think, a little praise here. You have been a staunch supporter of us when we came to you. You came to us and collaborating a few years ago to make this happen. You've gone on trips with us to Washington, D.C. to talk to those that are involved in trade there, and you've helped us advocate for the city of Wichita. Thank you. You've provided more value than just this report and just this plan. So keep up the good work. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Councilman.
No other questions at this time. We'll go out to the public. Another comment, though.
Okay. Yeah, a quick comment. Karen, thank you for your presentation. It's always been factual and very helpful for us to understand the value of what we do in the export world. It's been quite a journey from a few years ago when you first took this on, and it's been kind of fun to see. Since then, I've kind of learned that we're more of a kind of a precision manufacturing center that happens to make a lot of airplanes as well. But we do a lot of precision manufacturing on a lot of things that are non-aviation that we export, and your help in helping us understand that has been very valuable, and the impact we have on the state of every new dollar coming in. So I just want to thank you again for all the work that you guys have done.
Thank you, Councilman. And as our partners at Wichita State like to say, it's low volume, high precision. And in regard to the state, let me just mention that several of the legislators that we've been working with over the years are envious of the Wichita's and the Wichita region's export plan, and are working toward maybe having this throughout the entire state. So I think that it's not just about where we rank in the nation, but what we're doing for the state as well. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. We're going to go out to the public now. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Any further discussion? So seeing none, I would move that the City Council approve the proposed 2018 Economic Development Services Agreement for the Kansas Global Trade Services with an effective date of January 1 of 2018 and authorize necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Together Wichita donation of a dog park amenities.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Troy Houtman, Director of Parks and Recreation. The item that I'm bringing forth today is in regards to Harrison Park, putting in a dog park there, along with a donation from Together Wichita. In the audience today, I have Mark Chamberlain from Together Wichita, architects from WDM, Hutton Construction, along with that represents the Association of General Contractors here in Wichita. So these are all partners that are helping us achieve this project. So a little bit of background. Through our studies and knowledge of our parks, we've had a demand in regards to dog parks. We've had several folks come up with interest, and it's just a small item that would really improve and enhance our quality of life here in Wichita. So we have seen the trends in regards to that dog parks throughout the country, and we definitely know that there is an opportunity here. We have 3 dog parks currently. We have one at Murfin, one at Chapin, and one at Meridian. The final 2 are actually built on former landfills. So together, Wichita has been a great partner with us on several different projects. If you would recall that they actually helped us with signage on K96 pathway, and they've done some other great work throughout the city. So when we had identified this project as something that we wanted to do here in Wichita, they stepped up to the plate and worked with us, and the idea is that they will be providing the amenities and the construction for the dog park, and the city would be providing paving for the current parking lot that's there. I'll show you guys an overhead view of this diagram and the park, and give you a better explanation of that in a few slides. So as I mentioned before, together Wichita will be leading the construction, and they've already looked over the design, and they've been working with WDM, and WDM has actually provided and donated the design for the dog park. And then the dog park will be located on the east side of Harrison Park, and we'll have several different areas, one for a large dog park area, one for a small dog park area. And if there's funding, we'll be looking at an agility location as well. These items have already gone through the park board. What we did was we actually provided 8 to 10 locations to the park board about future locations for dog parks, and they went ahead and approved those locations for us to continue to investigate and look at ways to find funding and to put those dog parks into place. We also took this to the District 2 DAB and received a lot of feedback, but also a lot of support. So this is going to be the layout of the dog park. On the top part of this, which is actually the east side of the parking lot, is Todd Street, I think, or Todd Avenue. And on the left side of the picture, you'll see the larger area. One is for the large dog park, and one is for the small dog park area with the entrance locations. And then the agility dog area on the right-hand side, if we have enough funding and we have enough support to continue to put in those amenities as well. The city's responsibility would be to put in the parking lot, and currently right now it's a dirt parking lot that actually has curb and gutter. We would actually come in and actually pave that and put in the entryway as well, and then also assist with the entryway into the dog park area. Currently right now it gets really muddy in that parking lot, and it's really hard to find parking spaces because there's no designated stalls other than the handicap location that's way on the bottom right-hand corner of that parking lot. I was actually there on Sunday with my dog, and my dog definitely enjoyed looking at the spot and was excited about the possibility of that being a dog park. So the financial considerations, I just wanted to highlight that the Parks and Recreation Department really looks for opportunities to partner with folks. We actually find a lot of grant funds, and we find a lot of donations to actually put in these improvements for quality of life initiatives. So our focus is basically on the parking lot, and the adjacent parking lot would be funded with GO bonds, $100,000 from the Hyatt funds, and then $125,000 from capital improvement funds, for a total of $225,000, which is the estimate of the parking lot. The rest of it would be coming from donations and support from Together Wichita and their partners. They're going to be looking for sponsors as well. I think they're looking at some sponsors from some of the local veterinarians in town, as well as some of the dog supply folks in town as well. It's estimated that that whole amenity would probably be close to $250,000 worth of work. So we're leveraging really, really well on that location. So it's recommended that the City Council adopt the bonding resolution, initiate the funding for the project, accept the donation, and authorize all necessary signatures. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Troy. Does anyone from the council have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this issue? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the bench. I personally would like to thank the sponsors and the contributors to help make this a reality. This will be our 4th dog park, I believe, in the city, and the 3 that we have now are very popular, so this is a great benefit, especially for that part of town where we don't have anything now. So, Pete, this is your district. Would you like to make the motion?
I'm glad to. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I want to thank, you made reference to it earlier, Troy, but Together Wichita, for those of you that get the Eagle either in paper or online, you see various efforts that Together Wichita Group has done to improve our community. And a major one they did that you referenced earlier was the wayfinding signs on the K96 bike path, which has been well accepted and well complimented, and it's remained undamaged. So the citizens that are either policing it, it's graffiti free. It's just a great job. And so when Mark Chamberlain from Together Wichita approached me about helping support this dog park there at Harrison Park, that again the district that out in District 2 doesn't have a lot of parks, but they have a lot of other things that are really good. And so we committed to put a small piece to match, or not even match, but a small part to add to their private donations to get this done. And I think it's going to be a fantastic improvement. And I just want to thank, Mark is somewhere. Where's Mark at? Is he here? Hey, Mark, there you go. So thank you. And I don't know if you wanted to say anything, but you're more than welcome to address us if you want to before I make the motion.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm Mark Chamberlain with Together Wichita, and I'm pleased to represent this group of companies who are pledging to bring projects to the public and to the city that improve the quality of life. The dog park, pet-friendly areas were recognized in various studies of how we can make the city better, keep our young professionals here in town. And so we did some research on what it would take, and we're pleased that the city is standing behind us. Particularly want to acknowledge Councilman Meitzner for his support and the allocation of some funds to make sure the project is going to go forward. And we certainly want to thank the Park Department for their guidance in letting us do this, and our other partners, WDM Architects, for their vision on giving us a state-of-the-art dog park. We're going to be very proud of it. I know the residents there will find, and their dogs, will find great joy in taking part in this great piece of property and the upgrade that's going to happen. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to having a fantastic state-of-the-art dog park in Harrison Park. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. With that, I'd like to make a motion to recommend that City Council, we adopt the bonding resolution, initiate funding for the project, accept the donation, and authorize all necessary signatures.
Second. We have a motion and a second. And we'll pause for discussion.
Pause.
Cast your vote.
I thought I was the king.
Are we voting?
Cast your vote.
He popped a funny.
Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Community Event Resolution, Fairmont Coffee Company.
Mayor, Council, John D'Angelo, Arts and Cultural Service. What's before you today is a resolution to allow an event at Fairmont Coffee Company to celebrate a one-year anniversary. The event's August 25th. The company is an outreach ministry of the WSU Lutheran Student Center. Would like to use an outdoor patio for live entertainment, one-time use only for a one-year anniversary. Current conditional use permit does not allow for an outdoor concerts and entertainment on a patio. The city can adopt a resolution to permit for use not allowed through the community event process. Staff has reviewed the community event application and finds that all the criteria has been met. This is showing you the location for this event, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we will bring the discussion back to the bench. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Fairmount Coffee Company has been a great addition in District 1, and they host a lot of great events there, and I'm definitely appreciative for what they do for our community. So with that, I would move that we adopt the resolution authorizing the use not allowed by the Wichita-Sedgwick County Unified Zoning Code at the Fairmount Coffee Company one-year celebration and approve the permit for the community event.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
2019-2020 proposed budget and 2018-2027 capital improvement program.
Morning, Mayor, members of the council. This is the final public hearing for the 2019-2020 operating budget and your final consideration for the 2018-2027 capital improvement program. Just a reminder of some of the background information surrounding our budget and the preparation of the budget. The third bullet point talks about the need for a sustainable plan. Obviously, that goes without saying. We have to have a balanced budget, but if you remember when we started this planning process, we were looking at deficits that were to grow over the next 4 years, starting over $1.5 million, growing to about $3 million in 2020, and then growing beyond that. And so that's the context for the hard discussions that you've had over the past 6 months regarding this budget. The recommended budget, total budget, is $600 million. The chart, pie chart on the left shows where our money comes from for that entire budget. You'll see that charges for services is our number one revenue source, and that's because of the utilities primarily. On the right, you'll see that about a little less than 40% of our total budget goes for salaries and benefits, and when I go to the general fund, you'll see a much greater percentage going for that. 27% of our total budget goes for debt service supporting capital improvement projects. Our general fund recommended budget is a little over $244 million. As you can see from this chart, about 35% of our revenue is derived from the general fund, or excuse me, from property tax in the general fund. The other revenue sources are broken down in this chart. When we go to expenditures, there's two charts that I always like to highlight. One is by function area, and 76% of our general fund spending goes for public safety and for public works, what many identify as our core services. And then when you look on the right-hand side in terms of the way we spend our money, you'll notice that 73% of our total general fund expenditures go for salary and benefits. And that's why discussions about right-sizing our budget are so difficult, because in order to make any kind of impact at all, you have to do it on the salary and benefit side. For the 25th year, the council would freeze or use or adopt a stable mill levy rate. We would be at $32, a little over $32 per thousand. So let's talk about what the 2019 budget includes. First of all, it includes $3.2 million for 32 new positions in the police department. We would start to fill those positions actually later this year. We're starting the hiring process in August and hopefully have many of the positions filled before the end of the year. We would increase our pavement management program by $1 million, increasing from $8 million to $9 million, and then in 2020 we go up another $1 million to get to a $10 million funding level. In terms of fire, we'd have a strategic adjustment in our, at least from, in 2019 we would have a pilot project that would move us in a direction for a strategic adjustment of staff to better respond to EMS calls at what we call the low acuity level. City Arts, we'd work with our stakeholders to review the current operational model and to develop one that will again provide more sustainability going forward. We would maintain our cultural grants at their 2018 levels for 2019. However, then we would allow growth in 2020 for those allocations. In terms of economic development, Karen Page referenced a little bit about the change that we'll be going through, and that's a better coordination of all of our economic development initiatives under the Greater Wichita Partnership umbrella. Also looking at adjusting some of our fees associated with economic development so we get closer to cost recovery and again help us as we move towards sustainability. We, as you know, need to modify what we're doing in our golf system. We had recommended closing Clapp Golf Course, but the councils wanted to delay that. At least the feedback we have is the council would like to delay that until we can complete the master planning, working with the community to determine what will be in that green space after Clapp is closed. We're looking at revising our model for school resource officers, working with USD 259. Also looking at a different business model for animal shelter and looking at least 2 different options there. And then in terms of Cowtown, looking at, again, a different way of funding and moving forward with the management of that museum in a manner similar to what we're doing at the Wichita Art Museum. The adjustments that were recommended by the mayor and several council members and that are reflected in the budget I'm discussing with you today are summarized on this chart and were first introduced to the public at our hearing last week. Mayor, I'm going to move right into the capital improvement program, if that's all right with you. Our capital improvement program is a 10-year plan, $1.8 billion. The local sales tax would continue to be devoted for road projects as promised at the time of the referendum a number of years ago. And for the first time, we have adopted a new model for prioritizing projects based on input from the council at budget retreats this year. Our CIP for the 10 years amounts to over $1.7 billion. How that is funded, or how those projects will be funded, is shown in the pie chart on the left. On the right, you'll see how it's broken down by expenditure category. Reminder again about the benchmarks, the financial benchmarks that we follow, and that we will be in conformance with all of the council's established benchmarks, including the one that you tend to look at the most, and that's our ratio of at-large debt service to property tax revenues. Vice Mayor Fry at the last meeting had asked for one change in the CIP. We bring that to you for final consideration today. The recommendation was to move the Ridge sidewalk from 29th Street to Village Parkway out of the 10-year document and instead submit or add the $1.5 million to the wetlands project. We put the scores from the decision matrix for both of those projects here and in your council report to help you with your decision making. So, Mayor, the recommendations today are to approve the 2019 proposed budget and the 2027 proposed capital improvement program, approve the WSU mill levy funding, and authorize staff to take the necessary actions to implement the budget. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Bob before we go out to the public? Just one comment, one question. On Clapp, I don't think, you mentioned that we'll keep it open until we have a plan on what to do with the green space when we close Clapp. I don't think we've made the decision to totally close Clapp yet.
Right, I'm sorry, that's my mistake. I understand that that will be subject to the master planning process.
Yeah, so we don't know what it's going to look like.
Right.
There's a lot of conversations, as you know, could we alter it in some way, and so we'll try and figure that out in the master planning process. And two, and obviously I've been getting some of the emails, and we have some folks here from Cowtown. Are we impacting the Cowtown budget this year?
I think it's 2020, if I remember. Would be
So
the
there's
first
no
time.
change
No,
this year?
2019 would be a planning
So,
time.
so in 20, there's some discussion to look at some different modeling for Cowtown, but that won't be decided until we approve the 20 budget.
At this time next year, correct.
All right, just want to make sure I understood what was going on.
Thank you.
So we will open it up to the public.
Donna Worth, zip code 67215. So many elimination of services in this proposed budget. Parks, golf courses, libraries, arts, Cowtown, the animal shelter, fire department, and squad trucks. So many that citizens should have been given better opportunities to comment at public hearings. Why only 9 a.m. city council meetings? The claim that the social media town hall gave you feedback as to classify many areas as touchable activities or activities okay for reduction of funding. Well, we the people want to review such feedback. We do not believe that citizens think it is okay to reduce or eliminate funding for the animal shelter, for school resource officers, for libraries, parks, the arts, or possibly other areas now deemed as touchable activities. There seems to be pride expressed in keeping the mill levy the same that it has been in the past 25 years. Why should our city be proud of that? In 25 years, employees have seen increases in wages and benefits, costs of gasoline have gone up, utilities have increased, cost of goods and services have increased due to inflation, and the city's response has been to cut services and deem certain societal obligations no longer the responsibility of city government. That, to me, is nothing to be proud of. Yes, our state government has a hand in the difficulties faced by local governments because of their ill-advised tax lid they put in place. However, that does not mean that our city, if it wants to be a growing city, shouldn't evaluate the need for a mill levy increase to be put on the ballot. That does not mean our city should not evaluate the need for a citywide sales tax either. You, as the experts, should know of other alternatives as well. The option should not always be the elimination of services to the citizens. I understand that a mill levy increase of 1 equates to an additional $3.2 million. I also understand that such an increase is only about $11 a year on a home valued at $100,000. What a bargain that is to keep our libraries, our parks, our animal shelter, those types of services. That is something worth considering. Those of us losing services are also taxpayers, so we need answers. Why is the council itself being given $200,000 each year, beginning this year, from the sale of city assets so you can choose development or nonprofit projects you want to support? Shouldn't we properly fund our current obligations before choosing additional ones? Why is the budget increasing $6 million for the contractual obligation called professional services, a 21% increase, and the other contractuals category with a $2.75 million increase, or 32%? What are these legal obligations, and have the citizens had input? Now, specifically to the Wichita Animal Shelter, the city is reducing funding $50,000 this year, $250,000 in 2019, and $450,000 in 2020. This is unacceptable when there are lost and abandoned animals in the city. The city wants to develop a partnership with a nonprofit group whereby the nonprofit would be responsible for animal care, including veterinary services. The city manager wants this partnership to be with the local rescues. It is illogical to believe that local rescues have either the volunteer staff or monetary donations to absorb the expense of operating Wichita's animal shelter. It should be the operation of the city to take care of the lost and abandoned animals within the city. Not only has such a plan not been discussed with the Wichita Animal Control Advisory Board, but such a plan has not been discussed with local rescues either. Also being ignored is the fact that the current shelter staff has been working with the Animal Advisory Board to implement a volunteer program that could have resulted in the reduction of shelter expenses. But rather than continuing To fund the shelter and work with the community in this way, the city is proposing the elimination of shelter funding. Again, I repeat, it is unacceptable. It is time for the city and the council to step up and to take another look at this proposed budget. It is time to show courage and have an honest conversation with citizens, and at times citizens can actually attend. It is time to reevaluate funding alternatives, taking into consideration the human impacts of these budget cuts, as well as the impact on the lost and abandoned animals. It is time to recognize that a lot has changed over the last 25 years, and Wichita needs to change accordingly. Wichita needs to be a city we all want to live in, and that means keeping services and amenities in our city and in our neighborhoods, not eliminating them. Thank you.
Dakota Bennett, District Free constituent. Good morning, Mayor Longwell and City Council members. Today I want to speak to you about Old Cowtown Museum. As you know, under the current budget plan, Cowtown would lose its operating budget and the city would only pay for maintenance. This would save $700,000 annually. I mean, we can afford parking lots for dogs. But as we both know, for every dollar saved, we lose something as well. An investment not sown will not bear fruit. So what exactly would we lose if we actually went through with this absurd notion? Well, for starters, by closing the museum, we will lose 54 buildings, 27 of those original buildings of local importance, ranging in age from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. Among these is a fully operational grain elevator built in 1912. This is the only known grain elevator of its kind in North America that is operational. Wichita's first jail, the Murdoch House, which was home of, you might have guessed it, Marshall Murdoch, the founder of the Wichita Eagle, and Wichita's first permanent church structure. Various other stores, houses, and such are also on the grounds, both original and historic reproductions. And I almost forgot to mention the Munger House, the first substantial permanent building outside of trappers' cabins and such built in this area. By closing Cowtown, we will lose a valuable resource to the community. Many school groups visit Cowtown each year, and we show the children what life was like in the late 19th century. Families, young people, not so young people, locals, and tourists. Yes, we do have tourists in Wichita. As a matter of fact, Cowtown has been visited by people from every continent except Antarctica this year. All of these people, for various reasons, are drawn to Cowtown. Maybe they were dragged there by their parents, although by the end of the visit, the parents are often dragging them away. Maybe they want to learn about their community. Maybe they are drawn by the romanticism of the era in the Western movies that this region is known for world-round. Whatever the reason, we draw a good-sized crowd to Wichita each year, despite the many challenges of running a world-class museum on a scrappy operating budget. In the current budget proposal for 2020, we will lose 6 hard-working, dedicated, full-time employees that are faced with the very difficult task of running a museum with very little support or capital. Included in these 6 are 2 curators whose work extends far beyond the museum, preserving and documenting history for the entire region. We will also lose several interpreters who make sure that each and every visitor experiences Cowtown for the great museum that it truly is. Of course, don't take my word for it. Come out to the museum and see it for yourself. Better hurry, I hear there are plans underway to shut it down. Now that you know just a little bit of what's at stake, let's tackle the real issues. I will start first by saying I am aware the proposal does not technically close the museum. Just as technically, taking a fish out of water is totally different from killing it. Or removing a museum's operating budget doesn't technically shut it down. Which I just want to ask at this point, how do you justify a $1.7 million operating budget on the Wichita Art Museum, which does not garnish its revenue back to you, such as Cowtown does? I am not saying the Art Museum is not important, rather that they are all important. When it comes to the budget, however, leaving Wichita Art Museum untouched and Cowtown unfunded is simply not a responsible or unbiased decision. And to be honest, many towns have art museums, but how many have a living history museum, especially so rich in cultural value only at this point, as our own? Perhaps if you distributed cultural funding more evenly in the city, we could afford to make Cowtown even better than it is. Look at what we do with what we have. I think we've already proven that we are efficient. The fact that we are open as things stand is a testament to that. And if you really believe that the historic Wichita Cowtown Board, as great as they are, is going to magically pull nearly $750,000 out of a hat, as opposed to the current $5,000 a year they manage, I'd like you to tell us how that is supposed to work before you pull our funding. If you can't, it makes one believe you really don't have a plan. And the plan you propose, you may recall, was tried when the county owned it. You might also recall it didn't work. Second, yes, maintenance is covered in the budget. But if you remove $700,000, what's to stop you from taking the measly $100,000 left over for maintenance? What's the point if the museum is no longer readily available to the public? Cowtown is a living history museum, not a graveyard for our past that some would be so quick to execute. And don't even tell me that a large park that is highly flammable won't be targeted. I live 2 blocks from the late great Joyland. Pieces of only the latest fire landed in my yard for the umpteenth time. Up in smoke, our history, gone, irreplaceable. And what are you going to tell our future generations? It wasn't worth the money? Well, no worries. If we don't know where we've been, I doubt we know where we're going. Look, I am aware that making a budget is very difficult, and pleasing everyone is not going to happen. That being said, however, there are some things that simply can't be replaced later on down the road. There are many things you can do at a later time, but you can't rebuild original artifacts. You can't teach today's children the story of their great city tomorrow. By then, they will have moved on to towns that value their history and culture. So, the ball is in your court. You are the elected officials of this great city, with the crucially important task of keeping it great. You are the people who hold the keys to success and failure. Which door are you going to open?
Francine Sharp, 1820 Arkansas, Wichita. This is short and to the point because I'd like to get home and get out of my corset. A number of years ago, an individual working for the city attempted to close Cowtown. Thanks to Wichita residents, Cowtown volunteers, and John Rolfe, head of the Visitor Convention Bureau at that time, Cowtown was not closed. And now the city is, again, attempting to close Cowtown through a side door or a back door. Time, money, costumes, research, writing, rehearsals, practices, some volunteers driving from Oklahoma and Salina. They attempt to make Cowtown a true sense of Old West history the best that they can. Cowtown and its volunteers do not have deep pockets like the Art Museum or Botanica, but our volunteers and the staff are very willing to put in many more hours to bring history to the museum visitors. And staff does not keep a 39 to 40 hour work week. Sometimes it can be almost twice that. Don't take our funding by taxpayers away from us. We need to be open, and the staff needs to be complete, not told to fire everyone except a few. And they need to be paid an honest salary for their work. Thank you for listening, and I hope hearing.
Mayor Longwell, honored council members, thank you very much for seeing. I'm Ed Parrish, 1405 North Woodrow Court, and I am Roscoe. And I have been the house magician at Old Cowtown for about 10 years. And you'll notice that in my hands I have 2 heavy chains made of cold hard steel wrapped around my neck for a cozy feel. Tie them up so the knots are tight. Give them a yank. So that in plain sight the chains pass through my throat and spine. But my head's back on and I'm feeling fine. Mayor Longwell, you and I have played the shell game together. You remember that? We had a good time too. My take on Cowtown is from a different direction. My job as an entertainer at Cowtown, as a volunteer with all these other people, is to make sure people have a good time. Make sure when they come to Cowtown, they enjoy themselves. And I get to sit down with these people and I get to see them. And I get to talk with them about where they came from. 2 weeks ago, I talked to families from San Francisco, New York, and Guadalajara. And I have talked to other people who've come here from South Africa, one who came from Sarajevo, to the international officers who came from everywhere a couple of weeks ago. And I just want you to know that these people, many of them actually told me that they came to Wichita because they had read about Old Cowtown. That's why they stopped in Wichita. Now, obviously, not everybody stops in Wichita for Old Cowtown, but many do. And they spend the night here, and they go to the restaurants, and they go to the hotels, and they spend their money here. And so I would like to just set forth to you that Old Cowtown is in fact a genuine tourist destination, that it is a standout tourist destination that helps Wichita stand out as a tourist destination. And that's the main point I want to make to you today. The other thing I'd like to do, I'm authorized by the general manager of Old Cowtown to invite all of you to contact her for a behind-the-scenes tour of everything they do out there. And once again, thank you very much for hearing me.
Since we have a pause here, let me ask this question a different way, because we've heard some speakers say we're cutting $750,000 out of Cowtown budget. Are we fully funding Cowtown in the budget this year?
Mayor, yes.
Okay, just got a little confused with the conversation. So Cowtown budget is fully funded through the rest of this year and all of 2019, and we'll have discussions prior to the 2020 budget of potentially any changes. So we will have multiple public hearings, and you'll get conversations about what will then be the 2020 budget. But just to make it clear, because of the conversations, 0 changes in the 2019 Cowtown budget. It's fully funded.
My name is Carol Rose. I'm at 67220. But my home is Old Cowtown Museum. My family has been out there for 30 years. We have several generations of family members who are out there, not only my family, but other families. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter who is now a member of Old Cowtown Museum. I would like for them to be able to enjoy Cowtown as I have. I know that it's not being affected till 2020, but it's affecting us on a daily basis because that's what we have to look forward to. This is our home. This is where we spend our time. We don't spend it just to perform for people. We do it because we love what we do. We do have people come on tour buses from all over the country. And like Roscoe said, we have people from Mexico, Argentina, everywhere around that come and see us, and Cowtown is their #1 place that they wanted to come to. Just this past Sunday, we had a car show. We had a lot of people that came out, and yes, it was on a Sunday. We had 2 families from Mexico, born and raised in Mexico. They came to see Cowtown. The city gets a lot of revenue from our visitors, not just at Cowtown. And all I ask is that you guys please start thinking now and consider what an impact Cowtown's going to make on us as volunteers, our staff, and the community. Our museum has been here for a long time, and we want to keep it that way. It is a living history museum, and it takes the community and its volunteers to make it that way.
Nicole Connard, 6100 North Fairfield Road. Thank you for letting us speak today. We know it's not something that is hot on the topic today, but we're terrified. We would love that at the end of this meeting this afternoon, that there's something that said, in 2019, we're going to revisit what we're thinking about Old Cowtown Museum. Every one of us realize 2020 is when it kicks in. We also realize how fast time goes by. We just want to see the museum capable of doing what it does. As you look at the 2019 and you put people down for who get to speak again, who's important to talk about, and there's a lot of us in this town. We've all come up here over the past months talking to you. Please, we're asking, at the end of this meeting, put a little line that says, we'll consider some more for Cowtown. That's what we're here for. consideration. Please, guys. We pay the taxes. We talk about voting. We talk about volunteering. But the bottom line is, we're proud of our city. Let us keep our pride, and let us bring the tourists in to show off our city. What they're saying is so true. You know, a little bit of publicity on Cowtown, give Wichita a whole lot more money. And we want to help you do it as volunteers. So give us that opportunity is all we ask.
Do we have any other speakers?
I'm one of the Cowtown volunteers. My name is William Draper. I'm from 1035 North McLean, and I'm in District 6, I believe. Winston Churchill was quoted as saying, "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter." So, as is not to put democracy at risk, this average voter will try to be brief. Cowtown, Churchill was a Victorian. He was born in the 1870s, and he died in 1965 as Cowtown was coming alive. He warned us that if we open a quarrel between the past and the present, we shall find that we have lost the future. We have several quarrels that are coming about as a result of this proposal to cut Cowtown budget in the future. We are more, and the quarrels are this: are we more edified and prepared for the future by funding a modern glass, aluminum, concrete library full of books and information technology, or a collection of old wooden buildings full of artifacts and antiques? Do we maintain old buildings where people learn about our past by seeing activities such as volunteers reenacting Victorian dances that illustrate the difference between social classes in the 1870s? Or do we put emphasis on maintaining modern brick buildings where old people from a cross-section of our society meet to do more modern dancing to sustain their health and contacts? These are rhetorical questions, and I don't propose to have the answer to these. These are questions that you have to answer. Churchill has told us that a society that forgets its past is doomed to repeat it. Can we really afford to do so? If we have not taught our children about the sacrifices and perseverance of those pioneers who crossed and conquered the prairie around us, will they be properly prepared to make the sacrifices to traverse and civilize new worlds that yet lie beyond our imagination? Like in Churchill's time, we have another ongoing struggle, and that's the struggle between whether we should do things through capital, free enterprise, or we should do things through socialism. The Wichita modern recorded history resulted from free enterprise capitalism taking root at the junction of the Big and Little Arkansas rivers. It was a free enterprise that brought the pioneers here. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, but I can't ignore the fact that free enterprise may not be able to substantially sustain Cowtown as a venue accessible to people from all social economic classes. And what do I mean by that? If we privatize Cowtown and have to charge enough to make it pay for itself entirely without any governmental subsidy, a lot of people that need that education most, the children of low-income families and things, would not be able to get into Cowtown because they couldn't afford the admission fees. In Wichita, we have a disconnect between philanthropic organizations and the organizations that need philanthropy. And I'll give you an illustration of that. Spirit Enterprise and Textron are probably more affluent and able to align with the Air Museum than they would be able to align with Old Cowtown, because Old Cowtown's activities are pre-aviation activities. The Aviation Museum depicts activities that are consistent with the history of Spirit and Boeing and Textron. So they would be probably more inclined to support those activities over there than they would be to support activities at Old Town. So we've got this disconnect in town. The activities that are portrayed in Cowtown are probably still continued in some way by people around the local area, but there are not enough of them under a single roof, under a single organization to bring support to bear on Cowtown to sustain it. So you have to direct their support through taxation to give it a hand, or we will lose an important tourist destination. Now, is Cowtown valuable? I say it is, and its value is spread over a considerable continuation of time. And if you were to stop that time at one moment and try to measure Cowtown's value, it would probably be spread pretty thin. You wouldn't see much value in any given moment. Not enough to justify.
William, you've used up all your 5 minutes. Can you wrap up in about 10 seconds?
That's it.
Thank you.
That's it. Cowtown has value, and it's not measured in a moment.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Janet Wilson, 1152 North Estelle, and I'm here about the budget, and I have concerns. How do you close a program? You underfund it or make the hours inconvenient and then say, well, we're going to close it because nobody's using it. That's how you get rid of a program. And Wichita is very good and efficient at that. What Wichita is not good and efficient at is looking out of the box, trying to find ways of doing what you're trying to do is to cut costs and keep the mill levy the same for the last 25, the next 30 years, at the same time at the cost of its citizens. Why is Wichita rated #1 in the region under everybody else? So out of the top 10, we're rated #1 for loss of jobs, loss of projects, loss of public, and yet all of these people have increased taxes in some form or another, and yet they have built their base, they have brought sports programs in. Oklahoma City raised taxes and ended up with a basketball team. Wonder, is there a correlation with the mill levy that's been remaining the same for the last 25 years versus doing something out of the box, like maybe a tax increase, maybe a sales tax? I don't know. I don't answer these questions. That's above my pay level. But I will say that Wichita needs to stop its slash and burn policy. We need to reinforce our police, fire, our streets. Yes, there's funding there, but there can be more that needs to be done. We need to look outside of the box. We need to start looking at other opportunities and ways that we can do things beside the slash and burn policy that has been enacted for the last 10 to 15 years. And start making more improvements, start investing in our people if we want to keep them here. Thank you.
So let me just say this again. This is a business meeting, and I don't mind polite clapping, but it truly is a business meeting. Typically, we don't allow any clapping, but we've been allowing it for the last several months. But if you could kind of contain it a little bit to just polite clapping. I know you firefighters understand rules, right? So it's a business meeting. Let's try and act as though it's a business meeting.
Hi, Robert Schmeidler. I'm the president of the Fraternal Order Police here in Wichita. I just have a few questions as far as the budget goes. While I do appreciate Mayor and City Council, the commitment that you guys have made to public safety so far with the increase of the first phase of this staffing study plan, my questions are pretty small. From what I understand, we're moving money from the CIP over to the budget to be able to increase positions. 13 police officers in the field, additional detectives, and a few extra sergeants that we're going to be getting in the first phase. My question is that our numbers for 2018 were 650 as far as authorized personnel for commissioned law enforcement officers goes. In 2019, it's still the same, it's 650. I'm just trying to figure out if it's something that I'm not understanding as far as the budget goes, or if that's just a typo as far as where the budget goes, where those extra positions are coming from. One of the other things I want to say is that you guys have looked at and seen the study that the city did about 2 years ago now that came from an outside source. One of the main pieces that I want to push out in that whole thing, and this is when we're looking at budgets moving forward from here on out, is that the numbers that they provided, which was an additional 43 commission personnel, is bare minimum to be able to meet the standards that were to be part of that study. What I want to push forward and look from the council and the mayor is that we move those positions forward, that we do more than just the bare minimum. I mean, I hope that's not what we're striving for as a city. I'd like to be able to see us get back to where we were. One of the things that the mayor said during the last city council meetings is that once we get this implementation done of the staffing study, that'll be the highest numbers that we've ever had, which it's not a lie. In 2009, when we look back 10 years, the highest that we've been as far as commission personnel is 669. That's total commission personnel. That's detectives, from the chief down to your basic patrol beat officers. We're going to be moving to 683. I mean, 10 years ago we were at 669, so an increase of 23 people is what we're looking for, is when crime rates are soaring, property crimes are soaring, aggravated batteries, homicides, we're already at 33 for the year this year alone. I want to make sure that what we're saying when we're striving that our core services, which include police, fire, streets, that they are properly funded. And as it's been said here before, whether we look for outside funding, whether through a sales tax, whether through a mill levy increase, or something along those lines, that's what we're looking for. We're not asking for programs to be dropped as far as funding goes. We're just looking for extra outside funding as far as that goes. And like I said, Mr. Manager said we're looking at adding the extra positions for this year. I can tell you when I came on the department in 2007, we were about 30 bodies down. 11 years later, we were at full staffing, but now we're roughly around 25 or 25 plus bodies down again this year because of an attrition rate, because we're having an unbelievably high amount of officers retiring, getting fired, or quitting. So we're not even been able to keep up with the numbers. So I know to get those 30 extra bodies that we needed to get us to a fully staffed study took us 10 years to get there. If we were to increase by 43, it's going to be another 10-year plan, especially with the way that it is nowadays. If you talk to any of our personnel out at our recruiting and our academy, when they go to hiring people, we don't get the numbers that we used to get. We used to get 600 to 650 people apply a year just to become a police officer. Now we're lucky if we get half that. And out of that, we're lucky if a third is even qualified to become a police officer. So it's one of the things I want you guys to consider when voting on this budget today. Like I said, the numbers are remaining the same from 2018 to 2019. I just wonder where those additional bodies are coming from, and if they are coming, which we've been told they are, where are they going to be included in the budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Manager Matt Schulte, President IFF, Local 135, 428 North St. Francis. Just come back before you guys today. I appreciate the time to hear. Would like to know if there's been any changes. I didn't see any changes that came. I'd asked about maybe doing the pilot program on its own merit for the moving the fire department, and that the loss of 10 firefighters, and where do we stand with that today?
So our proposal today, Matt, is to replace the truck that has 2 fire trucks in 6 and 38 because they respond to an average of 4 calls a day, and replace one of those large trucks with a squad. So what we're going to do is move a fire truck out and put a squad in there.
Okay.
So when we eliminate the truck, that eliminates obviously more positions.
And that's a problem from our side because it's a reducing staffing. We have 117 firemen on duty a day to try to protect 390,000 people, even more when the visitors come. There's also the proposal to do away with squads.
So we don't know, Matt, what that's going to entail, and that's hence the pilot program
Sure.
that we're going to try and do sometime in 2019. So we don't fully have a written in stone plan until we do this pilot program. What we do know is we made 19,000 low acuity calls last year, and we're hoping to find a more efficient way to respond to what some have coined Band-Aids and aspirin calls.
You're correct, and we've worked hard. We've been in those rooms, we've been in those meetings. I was in the meetings with Councilmember Fry and Meitzner when we talked about it. To date, I've asked for that program, and we still have no idea what it looks like, what it's going to be funded with.
So again, we're going to do a pilot program in 2019. After we do that pilot program, then we will fully assess if we can move that forward in some manner to make those potentially 19,000 calls with EMTs.
Okay, so then back to the 10 fire positions. I mean, I understand we don't know, we're looking at what we're going to do, and that's why I'd asked to keep the 10 fire positions.
So we know we're going to take Station 6 and 38 that has 2 large trucks.
Yes.
And replace one of the trucks with a squad.
Correct. And Chief Snow would like to put on a truck at Station 18 also, which you could take those people and move them over there and do that. I know there's been talk about having 4 on an engine, which is good, but currently our stations have 5. And even to the NIST study, 5 is better than 4. It's about manpower.
So to make it very clear to you, we're not experts in firefighting up here. We take recommendations from Chief Snow and the city manager. That's how we've arrived at what we have in the budget this year. This isn't a city council-driven initiative. This is a staff-driven initiative, and they simply say, Mayor, here's what we think you should staff this year for our fire department. Is that an accurate statement, Robert?
Yes, Mayor, it is. If I can speak to Station 6 for a second. Actually, the number of calls on a daily basis, Mayor, is half of what you talked about. It's 2.2 calls per day for our vehicle. It's the least utilized piece of equipment that we have in our fleet. When we go to a staffing that will have a pumper and a squad, will be reflective of what our normal equipment and staffing would be in most of the stations that we have in the city.
All right. Matt, you've used up your entire 5 minutes. Did you have something to wrap up with? I'm sorry, you have a minute and a half left.
Minute and a half. I'd like to go back to the fire department budget, your own budget, and it says that the target for 2019 is that the fire department is on scene 40% of the time in 4 minutes or less for a cardiac arrest patient. Last year, in 2018, it was 48% of the time. Why is that number going lower? I mean, we're in the medical field. We do medical calls and fire calls. We're serving the citizens. That's not showing us that that's a key point for that number to go down. When we want to be on scene in 8 minutes and have 15 firemen on scene at a house fire, and 90% of the time in less than 8 minutes, that's a goal. That's a great goal. So the other part of that we're all qualified EMTs, and in the budget it says to be on scene 40% of the time when your loved one's in cardiac arrest. That's unacceptable on our side. And I don't know if you know it. I'm asking because that's the target. That's the target goal, to be there only 40% of the time, less than 50% of the time to be on scene in 4 minutes. That's why we need the manpower. Thank you. I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Doesn't appear to be any questions. Next speaker, please.
George Theo Harris, 67211. Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Legal. I'm going to be brief also, as my corsets get a little tight too. So, but I want to start by telling how appreciative we are that James Clendenin wisely spent some Hyatt money and got such a big bang for his buck with the MABCD proactive inspection.
Oh, stop it. George.
With this said, Mayor, do we have any other buildings or land for sale? Because it seems to be the only way we can get anything done with these tight budgets. Is there anything out there else we can sell? I sent all of you guys an email about some dog stuff. I just had a talk with Chief Ramsey and Captain Pinkston, and we've come to a resolve, other than I think we need a pilot project at Animal Control. Going private at shelter might not be the best alternative. I'm in favor of a sales tax or a mill levy increase to properly fund fire, police, and animal control as it is part of public safety. Let's vote on it. So that'd be brief. Hold on. In closing, as president of Grandview Heights Meadowlark, I want to stress whatever they do about the Clap Golf Course, I strongly urge us to consider putting the new Patrol East substation right there between Hilltop and Plainview. It would be a great enhancement to the area headed in the wrong direction. And Mayor, after chastising the fire department, they may, if you ever have a fire, they may take a few wrong turns to get into your house. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you for indulging me today in my support of the arts. My name is Victor Rose, and I live in the Old Schneider District. My wife and I, Gwen, both born here in Wichita, multiple degrees from WSU, and we teach here in the area. Gwen teaches art in the Derby school system and is a 3-time Botanica poster contest winner. And I teach for Butler Community College on the base of McConnell. I teach music appreciation and art appreciation. And in 2016 was nominated to the Kansas Music Hall of Fame. You know, the arts mean a lot. City Arts has been a lot. I was employed there when I first got out of school, and our band plays at Cowtown every year for the Steampunk Festival. But I think if you remember when Google was trying to come here, or considering coming here for a business center, that they liked Wichita a lot, but the problem was with the cultural and arts activities, you know, lacking in that area. And I think with some government support that it could expand. We have a great art community here, both art and music. And I think historically speaking in the government, you know, supporting the arts has been kind of an egalitarian thing. So I think City Arts does a good job at that, at supporting the base when people are trying to get started, and you know, the poor people or less educated people need a chance to get started for an egalitarian, what am I trying to say here, you know, level the playing field. That's, I feel like the city could help there in the arts, and City Arts does a lot of that. And for future considerations, if you could consider how the city could help out with equaling that playing field for all the artists and musicians in the city, I think it would help out a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Burnett Chance from the 67207 zip code. And was this meeting originally scheduled for the evening? I know last year's meeting was in the evening. Was it original?
So we tried to reach the public in a number of different ways, using social media, using DABs. So every DAB had a budget hearing that ran in the evening?
Let me cut mine short, okay? Last week's meeting was on Election Day, and many of us were not only voting, we were running polling places. It just seems to me that those things are scheduled far in advance, and in the future, it would be really great if whoever looks at the calendar could take that into consideration. I know you had a full house here last week, but there were other people who wanted to come and could not because they made a commitment to help out with voting, which they thought was important. And today, I know it was about the night out thing, which may get rained out after all. But I think it's important for this meeting to be in the evening if at all possible, and that's all I have to say, and I'm not going to clap.
Thank you. Next speaker. Any other speakers? Going once, going twice. We'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Discussion from the bench? Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, I had that same question about the police positions, and you explained to me where those are in the budget. So could you give a little explanation for that? Because they are there. They're just not where we might expect them.
I'm going to ask Mark Manning to explain where we have those in the budget. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Good question. The budget does include funding for Phase 1 of the Public Safety Initiative, as you've heard. However, when the budget was developed, we weren't completely sure of what classifications that would be composed of, nor exactly the amount. So what we did is we put an amount in the general fund as a placeholder. And next year, when we prepare the 2019 revised budget, sorry, I get confused on the years, we will then show the positions allocated within the police department.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that although I'm supportive of this budget, I do have concerns about the fire plan and how it will impact the community. And I just wanted to state that because it does concern me, and you know, I'll see next year how effective it will be, but I do have concerns about it.
Councilmember Meitzer.
Thank you. Are we, in the past, we voted on the budget and then we voted on the CIP separately, but we're combining them today?
We are.
Okay. Well, because I think most of you are aware I've got some concerns about the CIP and the debt service increase and some various things, but if we were voting on the CIP separately, I think I would be passing again, but since it's part of this balanced budget, I'll be supporting the big plan with some hesitancy, but I'm there.
And obviously I can appreciate that, but obviously we work really hard to keep that CIP underneath what isn't the ceiling, but underneath the bar that keeps us at the highest bond rating that we can have as a city.
I agree. We've done a nice job in the past years to adjust that.
Right. Any other? Councilmember Clendenin.
Mr. Manager, thanks for the presentation. I want to thank the public for being here and expressing your concerns. It is appreciated tremendously. Mr. Manager, we had one question about contractual obligations and the increase in contractual obligations, the $200,000 that, could you just explain that?
You're talking about for city council budget?
Well, the $200,000 for city council budget, and then, yeah.
I have to ask Mark regarding the broader comment, because I think that was just a comment of increase in professional services across the general fund, and I'm not really sure what that issue is about. I'd have to look at it in more detail. But again, if Mark has any thoughts on that, I'll let him respond. The $200,000 in the council budget is a result of what's happened over the last several years, where there have been special community events that have popped up, and the council has been asked to help sponsor maybe the first year of the event. The Convoy for Hope is a good example of where we may, at some point, early on, we had some financial assistance we had to provide, or we provided services that had a financial impact. And we had to really struggle to try to be able to provide those services. There's also a number of other community events that have popped up that way. What we suggested to the council is that we allocate $200,000 from proceeds of sale of property, and that $200,000 basically would be used at the council's discretion for small sponsorships as they come forward. If the council doesn't spend that money, and it's likely you will not spend that full $200,000, that will then roll over to the following budget. If we get down to a balance that's low, then the council will have to make a decision whether you want to replenish that at some point in the future. But right now we're showing it at that level 200. In all likelihood, next year's allocation will be less than the 200.
And let me add to that, because we often will have items come to us in the middle of the year unexpectedly. Another great example is the Youth Employment Project. They're asking for $25,000 if the county will match with $25,000. So those types of opportunities would be then funded from that source. Mark, did you want to go ahead.
Yeah.
Mark, did you want to comment on the other?
Yes, sir. Without getting too much into the weeds, I can answer the question about why contractuals increase in 19 compared to 18. And probably the simplest explanation is, recall that last year we shifted street maintenance out of the general fund into the CIP, and in 19 we're shifting it back to the operating budget, and that was about $4 million. So that's the bulk of the reason why contractuals increase in 19.
Any other?
No, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
No other questions, James?
Not right now.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Obviously, we are an entity that has to balance their budget every year. I wish every government agency had to balance their budget every year. And understanding that we have a balanced budget every year, it sometimes creates situations where we have to make choices. And now that we have a tax lid, and I get it, we're still under the tax lid a little bit, it'll create opportunities in the future where if we're going to balance, it potentially may call for us to go out to the community for a vote. And that could very well happen. But I think we have a pretty good process that allows a considerable input. I know that we've heard today that we're slashing programs because of the input we received. We're not closing any libraries. We're not slashing programs. We're keeping them going. Do we have a long-term sustainable funding in place? No, we're going to have to address that. But right now, we're keeping those things open that are most important, those quality of life amenities that we think do set us apart. And it's going to be challenging, but we've been able to do it this year. Again, Cowtown's fully funded this year. I want to make sure you guys know that. And that's a great asset. I've been there multiple times. I've been to weddings at Cowtown. I think it's a nice addition to our community. And I've said I never want to define quality of life. It should be painted with a broad brush, because to one group of people, quality of life means opportunities at Cowtown. For another group, it's just simply having a safe bike and walking trail. For other groups, it's having a comfortable place to play golf at a convenient and affordable place. And for others, it's museums and performing arts. And so quality of life is something that we should continue to paint with a very broad brush, and it's going to need further discussion in the future. And so I also want to show my appreciation for those that followed the rules. Thank you. It is a business meeting, and I know it gets out of hand from time to time. And it's not easy to operate a business meeting, but I'm sure most of you have been involved in many of them before, so I appreciate your compliance today. With all of that, I am going to move that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the 2019 proposed budget with the recommended adjustments, and the second reading of the necessary budget ordinances, include those for the tax increment financing districts, known as TIFs, and the SMID districts. Approve amending the 2018 budget for the sewer fund and the fleet fund and the South Fork TIF fund. Approve the use of local funds derived from property within the corporate limits for the Wichita State University Board of Trustees, which is the interlocal agreement between the city and the county. Authorize staff to make the necessary steps to implement the budget, including budget adjustments, expenditure control levels, budget administrative procedures, and to make any technical adjustments necessary to complete and submit the state certification forms, and to adopt the 2018 through 2027 proposed capital improvement program, including any recommended adjustments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Do I need to repeat the motion, Pete? Cast your vote. Motion passes 6-1. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Zone 2018-11, city zone change from single-family residential to general commercial on property generally located on the north side of East 21st Street North and the west side of Oliver Avenue, 11 North Crestview Lakes.
Dale Miller, planning staff. Council members, this is an application that you saw last June and chose to send it back to the Planning Commission, so I'll give you a brief chronology so that put it in context. But back in March 22nd, the Planning Commission reviewed the request and recommended LC zoning instead of the requested GC zoning, and they also recommended a protective overlay, and that was approved on a 6-5 vote. On April 2nd, the District Advisory Board 1 heard the case and recommended denial, 11-0. Then you heard the case, as I pointed out, on June 5th and returned it to the Planning Commission. And then on July 12th, the Planning Commission reconsidered the case and on a vote of 7-2 recommended approval, and they modified some of the provisions of the protective overlay, primarily clarifying the requirement for the screening wall on the north. Building heights are restricted to 2 stories, and they discussed access and how that was to be controlled. As you can see here on the map, the application area is the northwest corner of the intersection of 21st and Oliver. To the north, the west, the properties are zoned single family. To the south is Wichita State University, the Innovation Campus, and it is zoned U, University District. To the southeast is zoned single family, and then the red area is limited commercial. And the same way on the northeast corner, limited commercial zoning, along with the brown color is B multifamily. This is an older aerial before work was begun on the Innovation Campus. Still shows the golf course, but there have been major improvements to the intersection of 21st and Oliver. There have also been recently a change in the zoning to the east. The vacant area in front of the old shopping center there has been approved for a multifamily project. There is the convenience store on the southeast corner, or the northeast corner as well, and then the apartment complex to the north. And then immediately north and west of the application area are all single-family homes on larger lot urban scale development. There was a significant protest that amounts to 41.9%. You can see primarily it's 2 properties to the west, and then the blue properties are ones that provided protests, but they were outside the 200-foot distance that triggers the 20% requirement. Closer up view of the protest map. Neighbors expressed concern over increased traffic on their private streets in Crestview Lakes Drive. They were concerned that they're seeing more foot traffic from people who don't live in the neighborhood. Some of the lost drivers have ended up in the yards of people and have gotten stuck and caused damage. They complained about increased noise and vandalism as a result of the increased activity going on in the area. And they are concerned about drainage that would impact the lakes. The drainage goes to the north. And the comprehensive plan map shows this as appropriate for residential and employment mix. So from a comprehensive plan standpoint, leaving it as residential or converting it to employment would be an appropriate decision. This is the original site plan that the Planning Commission and the council first saw, and as you can see there, they have a building that runs east-west and blocks off access to the property to the north. That has been an issue, and when they came back for the second hearing at Planning Commission, they revised the site plan to show that there would be opportunity should the property to the north rezone, and should there want to be a cross-lot connection without you having to go out to Oliver to get to it, that remains a possibility. And so the other clarifications that they made at Planning Commission this last go-around had to do with the fact that this site plan is conceptual only. They are not required to build their site this way. It just shows how a couple of different ways that it could be developed. It also clarified that the requirement for the masonry wall, there's a hard requirement for one on the west property line, but the one to the north, should the property to the north be rezoned to commercial, then the requirement for the wall and screening could be eliminated. That zoning has to take place within a year in order for that provision to be effective. And building height is limited to 2 stories. And I won't go through the slides here unless you want me to, but I'll go back to the aerial. The City Council can approve the request as recommended by the Planning Commission on a 6 out of 7 votes. That would include the recommended protective overlay as modified. You can deny the request with a simple 4 out of 7 vote requirement as well. With that, I try and answer questions.
So just a reminder that this is not the public hearing. And then Dale, a question for you. So we sent it back.
I'm sorry?
So we sent it back.
Yes.
And nothing changed.
Well, they did modify, they made 3 tweaks basically. They clarified that the masonry wall requirement along the north, that there is a 1-year grace period should that lot to the north be rezoned. They clarified that the buildings are restricted to 2 stories in height. And seemed like there was a third thing.
So other than just clarifying, though, nothing changed in the plan?
Essentially, yes.
All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Johnson. This is obviously his district, and let him provide the direction on what he would like to see us go in.
All right, thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to say that I definitely appreciate Mr. Marks looking to invest in our community and bring what looks to be another opportunity for development around Innovation Campus. He and his family have been doing business in our city for a number of decades and providing necessary service. Unfortunately, though, I can't support this zone change at this time for a number of factors. First being the rezoning would be out of character for with the zoning and land uses existing on the properties located north and west of East 21st Street and north of Oliver. The development pattern is very different on the other 3 corners of 21st and Oliver, and that the northwest corner is still exclusively zoned single family and developed with single family homes. The properties on the other 3 corners have more intensive zoning and are developed with uses more intensive than single family. 2 of the property, again, is zoned SF5 and is part of a very stable neighborhood with homes that have maintained their value. The applicant stated that he had trouble keeping up the property, getting the property rented, but did not provide any evidence that the home was offered for sale as a single-family residence. Approval of this request would introduce more intensive zoning into the established single-family neighborhood. And although there's significant neighborhood opposition, there's also a core group of neighbors that are committed to building a neighborhood development plan that would ensure that all of the homeowners in Crestview Lake's concerns could be addressed in the uniform zoning rather than piecemeal zoning as we have in other parts of the district. And I'd argue that's the best way to do this in this case. So with that, I would move that we deny the request to rezone the property.
Second? We have a motion and a second. And let me just simply add, I would hope that we can, at some point in time, there's going to be development at that corner, but I'm going to remain consistent in the way that I have operated on these particular zoning issues, and I've tried to follow the direction of the person in that district, and I'm going to continue to follow that principle. And if Mr. Johnson believes that the right course of action is to deny this, although I may disagree with that, I'm going to go ahead and honor his actions at this point in time with my vote. If there's no other comments, cast your vote. So the motion failed on a 4-3 or 3-4 to deny. That's not enough to overcome. And so is there a substitute motion? Councilmember Meissner.
Thank you, Mayor. We looked at this before. It was brought to us with some effort to have this property and the property adjacent to the north be zoned so they can do what the citizens and what Councilmember Johnson was suggesting, which is kind of a master development. That was rejected at that time, and the property owner, I believe, said, well, I just need to get my corner done because it's an arterial corner. I respect everything that Councilmember Johnson has indicated. We've talked about this, and I think the additional wall along the west side that's confirmed and the options, I'm going to be as consistent as what the mayor said about that with your consistency with recognizing and respecting the council member. I'm going to be consistent with what when you see the massive changes that are going on at Oliver and 21st, including, I'm going to guess that a lot of the traffic problems that they said pulling into that area might have been people trying to avoid the cones and construction at 21st the last year and a half, but that's to be, that's just my observation. Anyway, with that, I'd like to see this property improve and be consistent with what's going on across the street at WSU and across directly to the east in that great development. I think it's exciting that that area and the 21st Street corridor can have some more commercial improvements than what it looks like today. So with that, I'd like to make a motion, adopt the findings of the MAPC and approve the requested zone change, place the ordinance on first reading, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the city clerk to publish the ordinance after approval on second reading. And I recognize that it requires 6 out of 7 of us to approve this.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. That motion fails 4-3. So if it fails 4-3 to approve, legally what's left?
The other option remains to send it back to MEPC again, or you cannot send it one more time, so you've already sent it. So in effect, this application would fail. The zone change application has failed because of a lack of approval, lack of a
And it has to
denial.
wait a year to come back.
If that 1 year deal.
Yes, they would need to wait a year to refile the exact same application. In 6 months, if things had changed on the ground, they can go to the Planning Commission and ask to be reheard after 6 months based on changes in what's happened in the area, but otherwise it's a year.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one appointment, and that is to my District 5 Advisory Board, Rachel Thomas Murphy.
Okay.
That's one person, not 3.
Way to keep your eye on the ball. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. No appointments. I just wanted to comment that the 60th DOCM observation on Saturday was a great event. Really highlighted the history that Wichita played in the civil rights movement. Definitely wish more people would have been there, but we'll definitely make sure the word gets out.
Very good. Certainly it was a great reason to celebrate, and the people that did show up, I think, thoroughly enjoyed it. So I move that we approve the appointments as mentioned.
Second.
Motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. And before we can adjourn, we're going to have an executive session. If we get there really quick, we can do this all in a timely fashion before lunch. And so I'm going to move that the City Council recess into executive session. There's two of them, one for 15 minutes, the second one for 10 minutes, and that the executive session is needed to receive information and advice on a personal injury claim pursuant to KSA 75-4319, paragraph B, paragraph 2, for legal consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship, for legal advice and claim settlement. And the session is required to protect the attorney-client privilege and the public interest. And the second executive session is for the very same reasons. And it also is to protect the attorney-client privilege and the public interest. And we return to these chambers no earlier than 11:30. And we will meet in the council, is it the boardroom, the conference room? I'm sorry, conference room.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor, if I may slightly clarify in the second motion, it's for pending litigation, not claim settlement, and that can be just made into the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Corrected. The second one is for pending litigation. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0.